Welcome back to another episode of Remnant Stew. I'm your host, Steve.
And I'm Leah. You know, the U.S. is chock full of monuments and memorials.
Chock full, exactly.
Chock full. Today we're going to explore some surprising trivia surrounding the well-known monuments and feature some not-so-well-known monuments that are both bizarre and unusual. So grab your spoon.
Oh, this is going to be good.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Well, now, before we jump into these monumental monuments, let's look at the calendar. Of course, yesterday was July the 4th, so we hope everyone had a terrific Independence Day. Happy July 4th to all of you. You might not know, though, that tomorrow, Tuesday, July 6th, is International Kissing Day.
What?
That sounds like a great day, I'm thinking. No matter what type of kiss you prefer, International Kissing Day on July 6th is the perfect time of year to celebrate this simple but powerful gesture. From French kissing and a formal kiss on the cheek to a kiss hello and a kiss goodbye. Kissing is an age-old practice with significance that extends far beyond just romance. So everybody get out and enjoy International Kissing Day on Tuesday, July 6th. Now, I think this next day...
Wait, I can't believe Phil stayed quiet.
I think Phil's in shock. Phil's in shock. Or maybe he's contemplating how he's going to spend Kissing Day.
Maybe.
Well, actually, before you think about it...
It's rather close to my birthday. So.
You really need to combine it. I think these two will combine really well with Wednesday, July 7th, because that day is World Chocolate Day.
Okay.
Yes.
So
some like it
bribery?
dark. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're saying bribery?
If that's the only way
I think they could go together. Yeah, they could work. Yeah. Some like it dark and bitter. Others smooth and sweet. But
We're talking about chocolate, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
chocolate, right?
Okay.
Chocolate, right? But whatever your flavor preference, this World Chocolate Day on July 7th, join us in taking a bite. Now, this may be a sexist statement. It probably will be. But, it's been my experience that men like chocolate. Women love chocolate.
I can get behind that.
You think that's accurate?
Yes.
Now, don't forget, next Thursday of next week, July 15th, this is a good day. It's National Give Something Away Day. It's a great time to clean out that closet, find some useful items that you don't need anymore, but somebody else might get some good use out of, and give it away.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
There it is. Yeah. So basically that was, drop your hoarding stuff over onto the message yard.
Yes. Right.
Over the fence it goes.
I know. We've all got things we can clear out that somebody else could really use, I'm sure.
I try to pawn it off on my kids, moving out.
Well, now back to our topic, national monuments. What is a monument? According to Google Dictionary, a monument is a statue, a building, or other structure erected to commemorate a famous or notable person or event. It's also a building, a structure, or a site that is of historical importance or interest. We have a lot of unique monuments around, but I think when I think of the word monument, kind of the first thing that comes to my mind is the Washington Monument, naturally.
Right.
In Washington, D.C. This is from the National Park Service. The monument commemorates President George Washington. It was first conceived in 1833 with the creation of the Washington National Monument Society with Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall as its leader. After a dozen years of raising funds, the society selected a design by architect Robert Mills. With great fanfare, the cornerstone was laid on July 4th, 1848, with President James K. Polk in attendance. 6 years later, the monument had reached the height of 152 feet. However, construction was halted as the Washington National Monument Society ran out of money. Kind of a bummer right there.
It was like this huge fanfare and raising of money and all of this, and then it came to a screeching halt.
We only got it about a third of the way up and ran out of money, but so that's the way it was. And so it sat that way incomplete for quite a while. In fact, one of the things that probably hindered more money raising was that the Civil War was looming. And in fact, during the Civil War, the unfinished monument grounds became grazing land for cattle that belonged to the government. You don't think about cattle belonging to the government, but I guess they needed it for the soldiers,
right,
for the Union
troops.
soldiers. The project sat dormant for many years until finally in 1876, the centennial year, Congress approved $2 million for its completion with the provision that ownership would be transferred to the United States government. Now, if you look at a picture of the Washington Monument closely, you can detect a slight color variation at that 152-foot level, as rock from a different quarry was used to complete the project. Initial construction was completed in December of 1884. The Otis brothers, you ever looked at an Otis elevator? Yeah, they were the first ones to create the elevator. Well, they installed one of their newfangled devices in the monument in 1886, the Otis elevator. And the Washington Monument finally opened to the public on October of 1888, 40 years after construction had begun.
Oh, wow.
So at least it was finished after a while. Now, while the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. certainly is impressive, you might not know that this was not the first Washington Monument that was constructed. In fact, it's not even the first Washington Monument that Robert Mills designed.
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Well, let's get on to this. Is an interesting story. It goes back a few years earlier, back in 1815, just up the road from Washington in Baltimore, Maryland. Robert Mills submitted the winning design for a 170-foot tall monument that would honor the first president. This Washington Monument was completed in 1829. It is constructed of marble and contains three elements: a low square base that contains a gallery. That's kind of how you get into it. An unfluted column. I guess that means it doesn't taper. It's got a circular column that goes way up. And atop the column is a standing figure of Washington, a statue of him standing up there. Just below the statue is a terrace, which can be reached by a spiral staircase, and it affords visitors a grand view of Baltimore. Citizens of Baltimore, by the way, at the time, they were feeling pretty proud in 1815 when they decided to commission this monument, because just the previous year, they had fought off the same British invaders who had raided Washington, D.C., and set fire to the White House in 1814. So They were saying, we're feeling our oats. Let's just build us a monument to George Washington here in Baltimore.
Now, you have to tell me, have you been to either of these Washington
monuments?
monuments?
I have been to the Washington Monument a long time ago when I was a teenager, many, many years ago. But I haven't seen the one in Baltimore. It looks really interesting, though.
Well, did you know that there's another Wait a minute,
Washington
there's
more?
Monument? There's more.
But wait, there's more?
Washington was he was probably the last president that everybody loved.
Right. First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. We said that on a previous broadcast.
That's right. Did you know that there's even another Washington Monument?
No, get out of town.
This one is known as the Washington Mini Monument. Since it's
mini-me, huh?
Yeah, it's like a mini-me. It's
right.
only 12.5 feet high, and it looks just like the main one on the mall.
Right.
And it's located just south of the main monument. But this one's completely hidden.
Well, how did I miss it? Well, I was just wondering how I missed it. Now you're saying it's hidden.
That's
Where
right.
did they hide it?
So the mini monument was built as a small-scale replica of the original Washington Monument, and it was placed in the 1880s as part of a transcontinental leveling program.
Wait a minute. A transcontinental leveling? They wanted to level the continent back then? Is that what it was?
Well, okay, so its official name is Benchmark A.
Oh, okay.
So Atlas Obscura, we love Atlas Obscura.
Right.
We got a lot of our information in this episode from it.
Right.
Tells us that that it is part of a network of 1 million control points across the country that aid in calibrating a surveyor's equipment.
Oh, okay. A survey marker. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's important to have these stationary benchmarks in order to create accurate maps.
Right.
This particular benchmark has been in use since the early 1900s. It was constructed above ground, but as it started sinking, they were going to tear it down. But instead, and I don't understand the whole reasoning behind this, but
let's bury it.
Let's bury it. That's what they did. And so that now it's covered by a manhole and is largely unknown outside of surveying circles.
Wow. You think they could get to pick up a few extra bucks taking people down to see the mini monument?
Well, and I think, you can.
Oh, okay.
You could take a tour of it. They take you over there and they
Well, of
pull the
course.
manhole off.
There you
and
go.
can
That'll be
look at
$10,
it.
please. Thank you.
And while we're talking about the mall, and for those of you not in America that may not be familiar with it, the National Mall refers to the long grassy park that is home to many American monuments and memorials in Washington, D.C.
I think it stretches from the Capitol to the Washington Monument.
That's right. At the eastern end is the U.S. Capitol building. The White House is to the north, and the Smithsonian museums also border the mall.
That's right.
So talking about the Smithsonian museums, a lot of people don't realize that the Smithsonian isn't just one museum, but a collection of 19 separate museums, and is the world's largest
Yeah, it takes
museum.
a long time to try to see it all. Yes, for sure.
And I've been to a couple of those museums, but it would take weeks.
Yep.
It would take absolute weeks to go through all of them. Its founder, James Smithson, had actually never even been to America.
Really?
When Smithson died, his substantial estate was bequeathed to his nephew, with the stipulation that if his nephew were to die without an heir, then the estate would be turned over to the U.S. so the country could build a hub for, and I quote, for the increase and diffusion of knowledge.
Increase and diffusion of knowledge. Well,
That's
that's what
right.
we want. That's what we do right here on Remnant Stew.
That's right.
We increase and diffuse it.
So Smithson's nephew, luckily for us, died 6 years after Smithson. And so it was that the U.S. was tasked with figuring out exactly how to carry that out. Okay, so there are a lot of ways to interpret the increase and diffusion of knowledge. It took 10 years and a lot of debate before the idea of a museum was decided upon. So why would a man who had never been to America leave his estate to the country? Well, no one really knows, but Smithson was born in Paris, the illegitimate son of French nobility, and he struggled with that all his life.
Oh, okay. That makes some sense now.
So it's speculated that he didn't want to give his estate over to any nation that was ensconced in the class structure and aristocratic society that he never quite fit into, in spite of him being, he was an incredibly accomplished scientist.
Right.
He wanted his wealth to benefit the common man and everyday scientist.
That's great. That's a great story.
And then in 1904, 75 years after his death, Smithson's burial site was being displaced by the expansion of a stone quarry. The Smithsonian agreed to take possession of his remains so that he could be then interred at the site of his legacy. The body was entombed and topped off by a marker in the Smithsonian and can be viewed by the general public. And so I got all my info from Mental Floss, and now I'm planning a road trip.
Okay, so he died like in Europe somewhere then, when they brought his body?
And I don't really know where he died, because he was very well traveled, but he just didn't happen to come to America.
Interesting, really interesting.
Until after
that.
Well,
we're all in the to the benefit of Mr. Smithson for sure. Okay,
so another memorial at the mall is the Lincoln Memorial.
Right, beautiful.
Very iconic. It's huge structure,
yes.
And I've been to it. It looks like a Greek temple with a row of Doric columns.
Right.
And if you're wondering what it looks like, you can just look at a $5 bill or the back of a penny.
On the back, yes.
So you may think, like I did, that the memorial is just one solid structure made of stone, just set right there on the ground, but it's actually supported on pillars. They go 40 feet deep into the earth.
Wow.
I think it's built that way because the ground is somewhat marshy in that area due to the Potomac.
All of Washington, D.C. is kind of a marsh.
Well, and so they needed a big foundation for, because this is a huge monument,
right,
or memorial. So it actually has, a basement.
The Lincoln Memorial has a basement.
It has a basement. So a 3-story, 43,800 square foot basement that they call the Undercroft.
Okay.
And some people from the National and Speleological Society actually deemed the cellar, the man-made cellar, a cave because it has stalactites and its own ecosystem. Yes,
of course it does.
Insects and rodents and everything.
Really?
And it's because it was made with marble and limestone,
right.
And it just happened to work out that way.
And it sits right next to the Potomac.
Yeah, that's for
right,
sure.
Exactly. So there are stalactites down there. There's also graffiti. Okay, there's some writing and some cartoons, but not like the graffiti that you're thinking of. It's graffiti from the original builders.
Oh, okay.
And so it dates back to 1914, and the historic graffiti has actually been preserved now under plexiglass. You may be able to go down and see the basement/cave/undercroft in person, since the National Park Society now wants to rehabilitate it and open up the undercroft in time for the Lincoln Memorial's centennial in 2022.
That's just next year. Oh, okay.
Wow.
So I wonder what was the original purpose for it? Do you have any idea?
Well, I mean, there wasn't a purpose. It just was part of the construction.
Okay.
It was just
It just
part
worked
of
out
the
that
construction.
way.
As they put these columns down into
Yeah.
the earth, it just created this,
The vacuum.
instead
Large
of
room,
filling it
okay.
up with concrete, because again, it's
Right.
40 feet down. So, okay, so while we're on the topic of presidential monuments, let's go to Mount Rushmore.
And I have not been there.
I haven't
have.
either.
I have. It's impressive.
Oh,
Wow.
you've been there,
It
okay.
is very impressive, and it's very beautiful. The whole area.
Gorgeous.
Well, it's not located in Washington, D.C.
No, it's
so
not in Washington.
It is in South Dakota,
Dakota.
in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And what 4 presidents? Don't look at the paper, but what 4 presidents? Can you name them?
I believe it's Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right.
That is correct.
That's right. And one fun fact about Mount Rushmore is that Roosevelt, who always wore spectacles, is not actually wearing them in this depiction of the mountain. Not exactly, anyway. It may look like he does, though, because of an intentional and clever optical illusion.
Okay.
Where the frame of his glasses would touch Roosevelt's face, they are carved out, so it's just really a suggestion.
Yeah, I remember in my memory
Yeah.
thinking it looked like he was wearing glasses.
Yes, so it's more of a suggestion rather than an actual sculpture. So where the frames don't touch his face, they're not there. And, of
Right.
course, the lenses aren't there. So it's just a really, really cool way of doing that. And another odd thing about Mount Rushmore is that there's a secret chamber behind Lincoln's head.
Really?
He's a little empty-headed back there. According to travelandleisure.com, Rushmore's sculptor Gutzon, that's G-U-T, or maybe it's Gutzon.
Gutzon, I think. Gutzon.
Yeah, Borglum,
Yeah.
wanted to expand the monument to include a repository with an entrance crowned by a bronze eagle, accessible by a grand staircase. So he had all these
He had a
lofty
lofty
ideas,
goal, yeah.
right, with vaulted ceilings, busts, and bronze and glass cabinets that housed the artifacts of American history.
Right.
So like a museum. The construction was started, and a tunnel was blasted into the canyon, into Lincoln's Head. And then it was all abandoned. Does that sound a little familiar?
Yeah.
The unfinished Hall of Records remains off limits to visitors. It's the bearer of titanium vault with porcelain panels outlining milestones in U.S. history. So maybe someday they'll finish it.
That would be
It
nice
is.
to see it completed.
I mean, the whole monument is just the whole area around it and everything is just absolutely beautiful.
I'm thinking remnants do road trip.
Road trip.
Bring it. Let's
Road
go.
trip.
That's a long road trip.
I've driven it.
We're gonna go all the way out to Washington D.C. and just
Right.
circle back. Yeah,
Right.
circle through South Dakota on our way home to
For
Texas.
sure. Well, as nice as all these monuments are, and they are nice, but we know what our listeners really like.
Bizarre and strange.
That's right. We can hear you saying, how about some really bizarre monuments? Well, don't worry. We have you covered right here. Let's start off down in South Texas. Back in the 1950s, there were some wacky scientists down in South America, and they were trying to improve local honey production by crossing European honeybees with African bees.
Wacky scientists. I think they've been called worse
Yeah,
than
well,
that.
worse than that. I was being nice
We
to them.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Not.
Unfortunately, some of the African bees escaped their apiary and began mating with the locals, creating a super aggressive subspecies that have come to be known as killer bees. The unruly bees began to spread northward, killing hundreds of people and animals along the way. In October of 1990, a colony of some 3,000 were found just outside the South Texas town of Hidalgo. Well, rather than being intimidated by their unwelcome newcomers, the good folks in Hidalgo decided to build an enormous killer bee monument to commemorate their arrival. Oh,
Because why not? That's strange.
it's hideous looking, too. We got a picture of it.
Wait, yes, we do.
So that's the Killer Bee Monument in Hidalgo. Now, let's go up to the Midwest, shall we? Some of my family came from the state of Illinois, not too far from where this is located. Back in the 60s, I can remember a TV show that was called Land of the Giants. Well, the show never really revealed the true location of its mythical land, but I think that it might have been Casey, Illinois, because this Midwest city boasts monuments to no less than 12 of the world's largest items. If you go to Casey, you'll get to visit, and here's the complete, at least the partial list, includes the world's largest rocking chair. That looks exciting, doesn't it? The world's largest wind chime.
Now that would get on my nerves, I think.
The world's largest golf tee. The world's largest wooden shoes. Now, I like this one. The world's largest pitchfork, because you need it out in the Midwest,
right,
Now, here's a good one. The world's largest rural mailbox.
Okay.
You can actually walk around in it. It's huge. Has a balcony.
You can't miss,
Seriously.
you can't miss it.
The world's largest key. The world's largest gavel. Some of you will like this. The world's largest twizzle spoon.
What is that?
I think it's a thing you swizzle stick. You stir your drinks
I know
around.
what a swizzle stick is, but a
twizzle spoon. I believe that's
we
what
gotta
it
look
is.
that up.
Well, maybe so. The world's largest golf driver, of course, to go with the
'Cause you
world's
go to
largest
the
tee,
tee,
right? The world's largest barbershop pole. The red and white striped pole that swirls around.
So is there a barbershop that goes with it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
And the world's largest teeter-totter. I don't know if it's a functioning one, but it seems to be the world's largest teeter-totter. In fact, according to their website, Casey, Illinois bills itself as the world's largest small town. So
that's funny.
let's include that on our road trip.
See,
Casey,
and
Illinois.
I wonder, okay, do other countries have this kind of weird thing?
Oh, I think they do.
Because we have like roadside attraction type things. So in Texas, in Seguin, you've got the largest pecan. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
So I remember driving through going, what is that? Okay.
Right. Nope. I've seen some things in other countries too, and I think that's going to be the fodder for another episode of international monuments that are unusual. Now, let's go out to California. Speaking of television, you remember the old Johnny Carson show, Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson? I know I'm going back 30 years, but there was a reoccurring feature called the Tea Time Movie on the Johnny Carson show.
Okay, I remember Johnny Carson, but I don't remember the Tea Time.
Well, in this, it was a skit that he would play from time to time, and he played a TV salesman named Art Fern, who was always hawking some kind of phony business. Now, as a part of the running gag that was in part of this skit was that in giving directions to getting to this business, he would always include the statement, "When you come to the fork in the road," and then he would display a map that actually contained an actual dinner fork on the map, and it was a sight gag, and everybody would laugh. Well, that must have been the inspiration for Bob Stone and Ken Marshall of Pasadena, California. The two local businessmen noted a forlorn intersection in their city that they thought needed a landmark. Hence, they sponsored the construction of an 18-foot dinner fork right
Let's stick a fork in it.
right at the point where the two roads split. Now, the giant fork has become the site for community gatherings and philanthropic efforts such as food drives.
Yeah, meet me at the fork.
The fork of the road, right. Now,
this next one is odd.
If you
This is odd.
If you're ever up in Boston, so we've covered the whole country. We've gone from South Texas to Illinois to California. Now we're off on the East Coast in Boston. We want to cover everybody, something for everyone in the country here. So if you're ever up in Boston and decide to take a stroll through the Boston Public Garden, you will soon notice an elaborate 40-foot stone monument. At the top of the monument, I can't say it without laughing. Yes, at the top of the monument is an unusual statue. If you get close, you can see that the statue shows a medical doctor holding the body of a man over his knee, using ether on a cloth to get him in the slump state that we just said depicted. My friend, you have just encountered the Ether Monument.
The ether, okay.
The Ether Monument. That's right.
So
now,
is
you
it
might,
a gas?
That's right. Now, you might think it's a bit odd that an elaborate monument would be dedicated to ether, and you'd be right. But before the use of ether, you got to remember that many people never survived surgery due to the terrible pain involved. A relief on the side of the monument reads, "To commemorate that the inhaling of ether causes insensibility to pain." It reads, "First proved to the world at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston October, and it has a big long Roman numeral, which I think is 1846, if I did the deciphering correctly. Massachusetts General Hospital, the site noted in this inscription, is just a short walk away from the monument, and its original operating theater is nicknamed the Ether Dome, and it is now a protected National Historic Site as well. So the Ether Monument is appropriately displayed there in Boston.
Okay.
All right, now let's go back to the middle of the country. If you're ever traveling through Alliance, Nebraska, you'll definitely want to stop and make some time to see Cornhenge and enjoy the very unique replica of the famed British stone circle.
Now, so we are going to have an episode on international monuments. We got to talk about Stonehenge. Like, it is the most replicated.
Right. And I'll be completely honest with you. I saw Stonehenge a couple of years ago, and I think Cornhenge sounds a lot more interesting than Stonehenge does, frankly, because they don't let you get very close to it. The real Stonehenge, you're like a good 50 feet away from it in a rope circle. You can walk completely around it. But whereas Cornhenge, you can go right up to it. You can even touch it.
Clearly,
you can touch
superior,
it. So let's see how this came about. As an artist, Jim Reinders enjoyed experimenting with unusual and interesting artistic creations throughout his life. While living in England, he had the opportunity to study the design and purpose of Stonehenge. His desire to copy Stonehenge in physical size and placement came to fruition in the summer of 1987 with the help of many family members. Cornhenge was built as a memorial to Reinders' father, who once lived on the farm where Cornhenge now stands. While relatives were gathered following the death of Reinders' father in 1982, the discussion turned to a memorial, and the idea of a Stonehenge replica was developed. The family agreed together in 5 years and built it. The clan, about 35 strong, gathered in June of 1987 and went to work. The dedication was held on the summer solstice of 1987 with champagne, poetry, songs, and a play written by the family. This sounds like a pretty impressive family, I've got to say.
So it started out like, hey, I got an idea.
Yeah, right. And everybody said, I like it. Let's jump on to that.
Whereas in my family, I'm like, hey, I got an idea. And they're like, no.
Mom. 39 automobiles were placed to assume the same proportions as Stonehenge, with the circle measuring approximately 96 feet in diameter. Some models are held upright in pits 5 feet deep, trunk end down, while those cars which were placed to form the arches have been welded in place. All are covered in gray spray paint. The honor of depicting the heel stone goes to a 1962 Cadillac. So Cornhenge in Alliance, Nebraska. Now, this is a really interesting, I like this one. We mentioned a couple of old TV shows here a second ago. So speaking of old TV shows, in 1985, a fellow named Steve Miller, who was a city council member in Riverside, Iowa, and he was also a huge Star Trek fan. While reading a book written by Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, Miller was struck by the author's statement that, quote, Captain James T. Kirk was born in a small town in Iowa on March 22nd, 2228. Although the town's name wasn't mentioned, Miller thought, why not Riverside?
Why not?
Why not Riverside? So at the next city council meeting, he proposed that Riverside bill itself as the future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk. The motion passed unanimously.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. The town changed their motto from where the best begins to where the trek begins.
I love that.
Now, in 2009, the creators of the Star Trek movie remake that came out that year honored Miller's efforts by officially naming Riverside as the birthplace of Captain Kirk. The entire town was invited to a special sneak pre-screening of the film, which took place in nearby Iowa City because Riverside doesn't have a movie theater. Had to go out of town for that one.
So it's a really small town.
All right, now, here's another one from the Midwest. A fellow named Sam France. Frantz. He was a farmer and an inventor from Dublin, Ohio. My wife's from Ohio. I always have to say that when we mention Ohio. He was interested in developing new species of hybrid corn. From 1935 to 1963, France farmed a plot of ground just outside of Dublin, which is also near Columbus, the state capital, and the site of Ohio State University. He worked diligently with researchers at nearby Ohio State and became well noted for his development of hybrid corn seeds, which were noted to greatly improve yield. Part of the Green Revolution about at that time, I think. Upon retirement, he donated his farm, which had now become a park bearing his name. Well, about 1994, the Dublin Arts Council had the bright idea to honor Sam by constructing 109 giant concrete ears of corn on the field that he used to farm. 6 feet tall ears of corn.
They know how to party.
Yes,
they really
for
know how
sure.
to party
It was a
there.
poppin' good time.
Oh, thank you very much. Local citizens initially took it as a joke. A former cornfield filled with corn, with giant inedible food at a taxpayer expense. However, they have slowly come to accept this oddball art display.
And what's the nickname for it?
Cornhenge. Cornhenge, yes, Cornhenge.
Of course, why not?
Right. Now, we've gone around the country. Oh, there's a section we've left out. The Deep South. The Deep South also has some great monuments, too. And this is perhaps my favorite. This item comes to us from the Encyclopedia of Alabama. You know, you think about the Encyclopedia Britannica. Well, right up next to that is the Encyclopedia of Alabama. I work with a lot of people from Alabama, so I have great respect for those folks. Let's talk about the boll weevil.
Makes sense to me.
Right. The boll weevil expanded into the United States from Mexico in the 1890s, and the beetles ate their way across cotton fields of the South. They arrived in Alabama sometime in 1910, and upon decimating cotton harvests throughout the state, forced farmers to heed the advice of such agricultural scientists as Tuskegee Institute's George Washington Carver and diversify their planting to include peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans. By following Carver's advice, the farmers around Enterprise, Alabama, they don't call it Enterprise for nothing, you know, in contrast to the rest of the state, rebounded economically in 1917 with the largest peanut harvest in the nation. Wow, that was pretty impressive. So to show their gratitude for being forced to diversify and thus reap great new wealth, the citizens of Enterprise decided to build a statue honoring the destructive pest.
It makes more sense than the killer bee.
We could describe this, but you really have to see it. We'll put a picture of this on our Facebook page. The Boll Weevil Monument, erected in 1919, features a statue of a woman in flowing robe holding a giant boll weevil beetle above her head. So
nice.
That's from the state of Alabama.
And listen, if any of you guys out there live near these, go take a selfie with it and send it to us. We want to see the boll weevil. We want to see you.
Exactly.
With the boll weevil.
Right.
Now for today's bookshop spot, the part of the show where we take you on a virtual tour of one of the most magical of places, an independent bookshop.
So our bookshop spot today is a store that I love the name of. It's called Book Soup.
Book Soup.
Nice.
It goes right along with Remnant Stew, right?
Right,
Yep,
yeah.
Yep.
And this one is located on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, California.
All right.
They have, along with books, they have stationery, greeting cards, classic vinyl records. Our last one had records as well. Candles, T-shirts, mugs, all kinds of gifts. And so during COVID, a lot of their events are virtual on their Crowdcast webpage. This bookstore was founded by Glenn Goldman in 1975, so a long-running store, and tucked in on the world-famous Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
Book Soup is the bookseller to the great and infamous. Is what they say.
The great and infamous. It could be the same person sometimes. So
They say we are known worldwide for our active events calendar, floor-to-ceiling bookcases, and celebrity clientele.
Fun. I'm looking at their website. It's really cool.
And I asked, one of the questions that I asked the bookstore owners is your building historical or remarkable in any way? And he wrote, this is Daniel Graham, who is the assistant promotional director of this bookstore. He says nothing in LA is historical. They will tear anything down.
It's hysterical.
And then when asked if there's pets in the store, he says no pets, but we're pretty sure there is a ghost, as evidenced by random books falling down from the shelves. So again, that's Book Soup.
Well, they do have earthquakes out there too. So
it's a shaking
that's
good
true,
time.
but I think they kind of know when there's an earthquake. Anyway, and so you can find them on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, Book Soup Bookstore, and at their website, booksoup.com.
Great looking place, booksoup.com.
I love that name.
That is a good name.
And now for something really smashing.
You know, Leah, when us Texans think of San Antonio, the first thing that comes to our minds is, of course, the Alamo. The ancient structure was the site of an important and inspiring siege during the Texas struggle for independence. Let me go just a little more detail. It was really part of a Spanish mission that was built in 1718 and was functioned as an outpost, as a Catholic mission. The part of the building that's still there today was only the chapel. It used to be much larger. It incorporated quite a bit larger, what would today be a large section of downtown San Antonio.
Okay, so when it was built, was Texas its own country, or was Texas part
Texas
of Mexico?
was still part of Spain.
Spain.
Yeah,
okay.
Spain.
Texas
okay.
was still
Sorry.
part of Spain, and
I'm
Mexico
not
was
native
part of
Texan.
Spain.
Yeah. I'm just here.
Yeah, and then Mexico broke away from Spain in 1821. 100 years later, it had already been there 100 years by that time. And then, as at first, things were pretty good. Even the new settlers coming in, they had a good constitution, good rights. But then Mexico was overtaken by a notorious dictator, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, and the people in Texas decided, no, we don't want any of that.
Next.
And so there was efforts made to break away. Actually, the Texans took the Alamo from Mexican military forces in late 1835 and hailed it as a great victory. But then in the early winter or spring of 1836, February and March, the Mexican army came back, and there was a long siege held at the Alamo. They were greatly outnumbered, managed to whittle down the number of Mexican forces considerably, but after about a 2-week siege, they were overwhelmed, and the Alamo was lost. But it was an inspiration to the other Texas soldiers in other parts of the state that eventually did capture Santa Anna at San Jacinto, and part of that famous day, they yelled, "Remember the Alamo."
That's right,
as they were capturing him,
because it was such a heroic last stand, and who, like Davy Crockett, and Jim
Bowie,
that's
and
right,
William Travis.
Okay, so talking about the Alamo, and can we, I think we can probably say that that's Texas's most favorite.
Right, yeah, it's pretty much the cradle of Texas history, I would say.
So in 1982, something monumental happened at the Alamo. Do y'all remember?
I remember this, and he was lucky to walk away, I think.
Well, honestly, okay, so there's what we've heard, and then there's the real story. So I'm going to get into it. So according to loudwire.com, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was visiting nearby, and completely to his character, he had been partying like a rock star and was very drunk.
Right.
When he stumbled out into the street wearing a dress of his future wife, Sharon. It was her dress, because she had hidden his clothes in the attempt to keep him inside, keep him from going outside.
Yeah, that's what
that'll work. So she put on his dress and went out and partied. Well, it makes perfect sense now.
This was before they were married, so she didn't know him so well, I guess. So he stumbled out in this dress and found the nearest statue to pee on. And it happened. It wasn't the Alamo. Okay, so I heard that he had peed actually on the Alamo.
On the wall of the Alamo, yeah.
Right, and he didn't. He peed on the cenotaph in the Alamo grounds.
Okay.
So, and what that is it was a 60-foot high
it's like
monument.
A cemetery monument, I think.
It's kind of like a cenotaph is a tombstone that commemorates the dead that are not actually buried right there. So, so that's what that is. And Ozzy was arrested, but the bond was only $40.
Right.
It was only $40. He made, which was a slap on the wrist.
Did he have it in his purse or in his?
He made bail and he performed the scheduled concert nearby, but he was banned from ever playing in San Antonio again.
Right.
That is until 10 years later in 1992 when he made a very public apology to the city and donated $10,000 to the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, which is the organization that maintains
Well, good. He made it right.
the Alamo grounds. And so the city forgave him, and Osborne continued to perform concerts in the city.
Oh, good. That's a nice ending. I'm glad to know that because I didn't know that last part.
And speaking of rock stars in the Alamo, Phil Collins. Now, this is a better story. This is a feel-good story. How about that? Phil good story.
Yeah, I got that.
Former drummer,
Thanks.
former drummer and frontman of the band Genesis, and he also had a pretty good solo career.
Right.
Yep.
Phil Collins, now, he's a Brit, okay? So he was born in London, but as a boy, Collins saw a Disney production about Davy Crockett and fell in love with the Alamo.
I remember that movie,
Yeah, okay. So as other kids were playing cops and robbers, he would reenact the Battle of the Alamo. I mean, and again,
come and take it.
It was a very historic and heroic last stand. So I could see how it would.
It was a pretty popular song back in the 50s about Davy Crockett, too. I think that came from that movie.
So as he grew up, his love became a passion, and Collins started collecting Alamo artifacts, weapons, relics, and original documents, and he amassed this huge collection. So like I said, the collection grew to be impressive, and in 2014, Collins generously donated a significant chunk of it back to Texas.
Oh, wow.
And so at that time, a $100 million Phil Collins Alamo collection was planned in order to house the number of rare items, including a rifle, one of 4 remaining in existence, owned by soldier frontiersman Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett, yeah.
A fringed leather pouch carried by Crockett, and an original Bowie knife, which Jim Bowie had in his possession during the Battle of the Alamo.
Amazing.
Collins was quoted as saying, "This completes the journey for me. These artifacts are coming home." So Collins's collection is believed to be the largest of its kind, with over 200 total items. And so now, and I didn't know this when I was researching. I mean, I knew about the story.
Right.
But so all of this was planned. Well, now they just in March. So yeah, in March of this year, there were announcements made that the museum has now been opened to the public.
Okay, great.
Oh, wow.
That's a good way to see that.
I got my information from the alamo.org as well as rollingstone.com.
Yeah, because I've been recently there. That hasn't opened yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now, while you're in San Antonio, you might want to see another interesting monument. This one's a little bit different, and you actually have to go through a little bit of clearance to see this one.
I'm surprised we didn't know about this, because this would have fit really well into our other episode.
Right. It would have been a good one for our 4-legged soldiers. But I'm referring to the Military Working Dog Team National Monument. This monument, dedicated in 2013, is located inside Lackland Air Force Base, which is now called Joint Base San Antonio Lackland, and is designed to honor and recognize those working military dogs and their handlers. The main part of the memorial features a bronze statue of a soldier flanked by 4 different breeds of military dogs. Now, here's the different breeds: a Doberman Pinscher, a German Shepherd, a Labrador Retriever, and a Belgian Malinois.
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 Yeah, my son has one of those.
Oh, Malinois.
It's a lot like a German Shepherd.
Malinois. Okay. However, for many visitors, the most touching part of the memorial is the separate, not-forgotten fountain, which features a Vietnam-era soldier pouring water from a canteen into his helmet for his dog to drink from.
Aww.
Yeah, it's really nice. Nice-looking monument. Now, you do have to go through the visitor center at Lackland and go through a little screening to be able to go see that.
I bet you can't take your dog through, can you?
Now, I don't know if you can take your dog or not. That would be interesting if you could. Now, here's a good question for you. What was the first? This is not really our official trivia question, but this is a warm up to the trivia question. What was the first designated national monument in the United States? That answer might come as a surprise to you. According to the National Park Service, the 1,200-foot rocky monolith in Wyoming known as Devil's Tower was designated by Teddy Roosevelt as the very first national monument in 1906.
That's very Teddy Roosevelt.
Right. Now, have you seen this one?
No, I have not seen this one.
No, I haven't seen it either. I've seen the pictures of it, though. It'll make it really interesting.
And it's in Wyoming.
It's in Wyoming, and it looks basically like an enormous tree stump that goes up 1,200 feet, but it's a rocky outcrop is what it is. and it has rocky cracks. It's circular, and they're like crevices up the side of all the sides of it.
And we'll have a picture of this.
Right. Now, long before Caucasian settlers arrived, this enormous outcrop has been inspiring Native Americans for centuries. They called it Mateo Teepee, or Grizzly Bear Lodge, and it had several legends regarding its origin. I like this one. According to the Kiowas, their tribe once camped on a stream where there were many bears. One day, 7 little girls were playing at a distance from the village and were chased by some bears. The girls ran toward the village, and when the bears were about to catch them, they jumped to a low rock about 3 feet in height. One of them prayed to the rock, "Rock, take pity on us. Rock, save us." The rock heard them and began to elongate itself upward, pushing the children higher and higher out of reach of the bears. When the bears jumped up and scratched the rock that would have caused the crevices on the side, they broke their claws and fell back down upon the ground. The rock continued to push the children upward into the sky while the bears jumped at them.
Oh, wow. That's
a good story.
Right.
That is a good story.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
So today's oddity du jour. In 2018, Jeff Weekly got quite a surprise. He's an avid sportsman, and he had a painful bump on his foot, form on his foot. He opened it up, expecting it to be just a normal blister, but something solid came out.
So came out of his foot?
Came out of his foot, something that looked suspiciously like a tooth. In fact, it turned out to be a shark's tooth, and he knew just exactly where it came from.
He had a shark's tooth in his foot.
He had a shark's tooth in his foot that he got 24 years prior to that. So in 1994, Jeff was surfing off of a Florida beach when he got bitten on his foot. It was just one bite when the culprit, and of course he didn't see it, so he didn't really know if it was a shark or not.
Yeah.
But the culprit decided that Jeff wasn't the meal he was looking for and disappeared back into the waves. So he never, like I said, he never really saw it and knew exactly what it had bitten him.
Right.
But, you know, if something bites you in the ocean, it's got to be a shark, right? So Jeff, out of this tooth, Jeff planned to make a pendant, but then he heard a story about researchers that were able to identify the species of shark that bit a boy off the coast of New York. They used a tooth that came from a wound in his leg. So Jeff sent the tooth off and then started to worry a little bit.
So Jeff had a nibble.
Yes, he did. He had a nibble, and there's a picture of him, and it's, you know, it's a nibble.
Right.
I don't think he actually had to get stitches or anything, but it was, you know, it's definitely.
I wonder
a
if he
bite.
knew that the tooth was in there from the bite originally.
No, he didn't. He didn't. He was absolutely surprised. And I've heard a lot of stories about people that have been in like car accidents or different things, which later, years later, glass or gravel or something working their way out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to him. But Jeff said, and I quote, "I was very excited to determine the identity of the shark because I'd always been curious. I was also a little bit hesitant to send in the tooth because for a minute I thought they would come back and tell me I'd been bitten by a mackerel or a houndfish or something really humiliating."
Barracuda.
So researchers cleaned the tooth and extracted some of the pulp to obtain the DNA. And using databases of shark and ray DNA, they were able to determine that it was, in fact, a shark. It was a black tip shark that bit Jeff and left this little memento.
Okay, black-tipped shark.
A black-tipped shark. And they're not exactly small. They can grow up to be about 8 feet in length, but they're usually pretty timid. In fact, about 70% of shark bite victims never discover what species bit them because shark bites rarely turn into shark attacks. Most species are not a threat to humans, and the bite is just a case of mistaken identity. So despite the bite, Jeff has remained an avid surfer. He says, "I certainly don't have a hatred of sharks or any feeling of vindictiveness toward them. They're part of our natural world," he said. So no hard feelings.
No hard feelings between me and the shark. Well, that was nice. The shark lost a tooth, by the way, so, you know.
Yeah, the shark gave into that. So.
That's nice.
Okay.
Well, now let's go back to our monuments. You know, it seems like as I was researching, I found quite a few here in the state of Texas, and so I actually culled a few of them out. But this one, it really needs to be a part of this listing. Because,
I agree.
I'm actually a bit familiar with this one. In the southwest Texas city of Crystal City. Crystal City, Texas, has an interesting history. When the railroad arrived in this town in the late 1920s and early 1930s, the town made its name for onions.
Okay.
Yeah, well known, famous for onions. But during the Great Depression, Crystal City thrived because of its spinach. The town could produce about 10,000 pounds a day. That's a lot of spinach.
That is.
The thriving spinach business landed the town the title as World Spinach Capital. I don't know if there was really a selection committee for that or a competition, but they probably just decided, hey, you know what? Right here, we're the world spinach capital. Yeah, prove that we're not. So according to roadsideamerica.com, Crystal City is still a major producer of spinach today. Well, in 1937, with the blessing of creator E.C. Sager, the town erected a statue of...
Of course.
Popeye.
Popeye the Sailor Man.
Right, Popeye. Obviously, with the title of World Spinach Capital and Popeye's love for spinach, the tribute is perfect. The statue still lives in front of the city hall today, and it's right there for you to take the perfect selfie with. There's even a second statue inside the Chamber of Commerce. So if you're down in Southwest Texas, run through Crystal City and get a picture with Popeye.
And send it to us.
Right, in the spinach capital of the world. Now, if you're ever passing through Hamilton, New Jersey, going all around the country.
Yeah, we are. We're traveling all over.
Right. You definitely want to make a stop to see the Great Depression breadline statue. This seems like an unusual thing to depict, but it is an important time in history. The bronze sculpture recreates the harsh conditions of the 1930s as it depicts 5 men who are waiting in line to receive food from a soup kitchen. The figures all have downcast eyes and long coats, serving as a reminder of the extreme conditions during one of the darker periods of American history.
Oh, wow. I have a bread token from that period. My grandparents owned a hardware store, but my grandmother's parents, so my great-grandparents, owned a grocery store during, in that era in Louisville. Mm-hmm. And they had, and I have the box too. There's a wooden box that my grandfather made.
A bread box. Yeah.
Well, they would put the tokens in there.
Oh, the tokens.
They would put the tokens. So, you would get and I don't know exactly how it was.
How they were distributed.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if it was kind of like food stamps are today, or I don't know. But you would get these tokens, and it was good for one loaf of bread. Right.
Interesting. I know there were ration booklets during World War II, so this was just before that. Something similar, I guess. Now, let's see. Also from attractionsofamerica.com, we find some interesting monuments to the corporate world. I like a couple of these, really. One is called Corporate Head in Los Angeles, California. It's a bronze depiction of a businessman holding a briefcase who has his head stuck in the wall of Ernst & Young building. The statue's creator, Terry Allen, claims that it's a critique of corporate America and its impact on the average worker. I don't know. I think corporate, the average worker would get a good laugh out of the statue of the guy with his head stuck in the building.
Yeah, like looking over his shoulder. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? His head is just right in there. Now, this one's really one of my favorites. So a similar statue can be found in Brooklyn. A crocodile eating a capitalist depicts a scene pretty much like you would expect from a title like that. A crocodile with human-like hands emerges from a manhole and is devouring a businessman whose head appears to be a money bag.
So it's a sewer crocodile.
Right. A sewer crocodile eating a capitalist. And finally, we have a charging bull versus fearless girl. Now, for years, Charging Bull was a standalone bronze statue depicting the fearlessness of Wall Street. This is in New York City, right outside of the New York Stock Exchange. So there was this big bull. If you're confident about the future of the stock market, you were said to be bullish, and so there's this enormous bull out there. That was until Fearless Girl was installed in 2017. Fearless Girl depicts a girl with her hands on her hips, proudly staring down Charging Bull. Fearless Girl was constructed to send the positive message of workplace gender diversity on the male-dominated Wall Street scene.
There you go.
I think that's well-needed. Yeah. If you saw The Wolf of Wall Street, I think Fearless Girl is well-needed at that location.
Okay, so for our last monumental tidbit, we head back to Washington, D.C., where it all started, to the Washington National Cathedral. Atlas Obscura tells us that the Washington National Cathedral is the 6th largest cathedral in the world. It is of neo-Gothic design, and I don't know what the difference between Gothic design and neo-Gothic design is, except for maybe Gothic is more ornate. But it's a functioning place of worship as well as a popular tourist destination. It is
not seen this. Have you been there?
breathtatingly beautiful. I haven't been there.
I haven't been there.
It looks. I've seen it on television.
But I
There's
want to
another
go
stop
now
we gotta find.
because listen to this. So you might be a bit surprised to find a certain science fiction villain depicted in the various sculptures that adorn the building. During the 1980s, an outer portion of the National Cathedral was under construction, and a contest was held for school children to design a sculpture to be added to the towers. I mean, how cool is that?
Right. Yeah.
A child by the name of Christopher Rader drew the design for the sculpture, and it was selected as the third place prize. And it doesn't mention what the first and second were.
And what do they get?
But the third place prize included an addition to the renovation. So this sculpture is often referred to as a gargoyle. And so you know what gargoyles
gargoyles.
look like.
You see them around medieval churches in Europe for sure.
But technically, a gargoyle, at least architecturally speaking, has it's a water spout.
Right.
Okay.
It's a drain.
And the ones that look like gargoyles but are not water spouts are technically called grotesques. So this is a grotesque. It doesn't have a water spout. So to see the sculpture, you need a good set of binoculars. And from the northwest parking lot, near the top of the northwest tower, Darth Vader can be spotted between two massive arches.
So they got Darth Vader on the National Cathedral? I never knew that.
Yes. And while it might seem a little irreverent, you got to remember that gargoyles and other grotesques were often depicted as what? Demons and monsters. And because it's
he is
kinda,
a Sith Lord. I mean,
that's right. You know, the dark side.
I wonder if the pastor ever says, turn to the book of Luke.
That's good.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
You know how it works. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant and Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post about monuments. Put your answer to the Trivia Challenge question in the comments of that post, and the first person to do that will be the winner. So what is our question today, Steve?
Well, the question today is, what monument was held hostage by whom and why?
And that question comes straight to us from Harbin Gould. Thank you, Harbin.
All right,
Good job,
Harbin.
Good job. What monument was held hostage by whom and why? Held hostage.
Remnant Stew is created by me, Leah Lamp. Dr. Judy Meeker and I research, write, and host each episode.
And mispronounce.
Yes, and butcher all kinds of pronunciations. Audio is produced by Philip Sinquefield, who puts in his little dad jokes here and there. Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod, with voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks to Judy Meeker and Harbin Gould for helping us out as well. You can connect with us through our Facebook and Instagram at Remnant Stew Podcast, or through our email at staycurious@remnantstew.com. Send us an email and say hi. Tell us your favorite episode so far. Tell us what you want to hear us cover in an episode, and send us selfies, especially with monuments.
And now, speaking of monuments, this was all United States. We're planning another one for international monuments coming your way soon. So before you go, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss an episode. Please take the time to give us a review on iTunes. There's a convenient link on our website to make it easy for you. We also have a button on our website where you can, quote, buy us a coffee to help us cover the cost of producing the podcast. And also share Remnant Stew with your friends, family, and your president, museum curator, and taxi driver. And until next time, please remember to be kind and always stay curious.